Do you know what people regret the most? I do. I spent 42 years driving a taxi in New York City, and I heard it from thousands of people with my own ears. My name is Harold. I am 79 years old. I drove a cab in New York, and I retired just before I turned 70. I worked in the early mornings and late at night, in the snow and in the rain. People going to airports, people going to hospitals, people carrying divorce papers, people who just needed to go somewhere without saying why. All of them sat in the back of my cab. And in those 42 years, I learned one thing. What people regret at the end is not what you think it is. But I have to be honest with you. It took me too long to understand it myself. I spent 42 years listening to the regrets of thousands of strangers, and the whole time I was making the same mistake in my own life. And if you are listening to this right now, I started driving a cab when I was 26 years old. I just needed the money. My wife and I had just gotten married. We had a small apartment in Queens, and our first child was on the way. I didn't have many options. I got my license and started the very next morning. I still remember that first day. It was 4 a.m, still dark outside, and the streets were quiet in a way New York almost never is. I didn't know the city looked like that at that hour. I had never seen it before. I told myself it was temporary, just a year or two, and then I would figure something else out. But 1 year became 2, and 2 became 5, and somewhere along the way I stopped counting. By the time I looked up, 20 years had passed. My kids had been born, grown up, started school, and I had spent most of that time behind the wheel. I was a hard worker. I left at 5 in the morning and came home at 10 at night more often than I can count. I worked weekends. There were days I came home after the kids were already asleep and left again before they woke up. When I got home, my wife would be in the kitchen doing something, and I would shower and go to bed. That was most nights, whether it was a weekday or a Saturday. I believed something back then. I believed that a man's job was to provide, that working hard for your family was the same thing as loving your family, that the more you earned, the better a husband and father you were. My own father had lived that way, and everyone around me lived that way too. Nobody ever told me that belief was wrong, and I never thought to question it. I paid the bills. I covered the kids' expenses. I made sure there was always enough. That was my role, I thought, and I told myself for a long time that I was doing it well. Around that time, there was one passenger I still think about. He looked to be in his early 70s. He got in somewhere in Midtown Manhattan, well-dressed, good briefcase, the kind of man who looks like he has spent his whole life being in charge of things. He gave me his destination and went quiet, just looked out the window. We drove for a long time without a word. Then, with about 5 minutes left, he turned and asked me something out of nowhere. Do you have a good relationship with your kids? I hesitated for a moment, then said yes, more or less. He nodded slowly, still looking out the window. And then he said very quietly, almost to himself, I have 3 sons. None of them call me anymore. I was working the whole time they were growing up. That was all. We pulled up to his building. He paid, said thank you, and walked inside. I watched him go, and something about his back, the way he carried himself walking away, looked smaller than when he had gotten in. I never knew his name. I can't remember his face clearly anymore, but I have never forgotten those words. While all of that was happening, my kids were growing up without me. My older son played baseball. He was a pitcher on a school team. I know that because someone told me later. That is the honest truth. I knew he played, but I was almost never there to watch. One Saturday there was a game, and it was a busy day on the road. I just went to work. My son never said anything about it. I think by that point, he had just accepted it. That was who his father was. My younger son was a quiet kid. He had been quiet since he was small. He never said much when he came home from school, never brought things up on his own. I thought that was just his personality. But my wife told me something years later. She said that when he was young, he used to try to talk to me more than once, but I always looked tired or busy, so he stopped trying. When she told me that, I didn't know what to say. My wife and I talked less and less as the years went on. At first, I didn't notice. I was so used to being tired that it just felt normal. But at some point, we stopped talking at dinner, stopped saying much of anything in the evenings. We would sit together watching television and not exchange a word. It wasn't tense. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just quiet. It just became that way. Slowly. Neither of us ever said a word about it. I didn't understand that kind of quiet. It wasn't peace. It was distance. It had been growing for years, and I had never once stopped to look at it. That was not the first time I had heard something like that. Over 42 years, I heard versions of that story more times than I can count. Sons and daughters who had stopped calling, husbands and wives who had been living like strangers for years, old friendships that had quietly disappeared, and the people saying these things were almost always the same kind of people. The ones who looked from the outside like they had everything figured out. Nice cars, good neighborhoods, the kind of lives that looked solid and successful. Those were the ones who said the heaviest things in the back of my cab. I spent a long time thinking about why, and eventually I understood. Those people never planned to lose their families. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to let go. They had just kept telling themselves they would get to it later. Not now. Things are too busy. When this project is finished, when the kids are older, when I retire, then I will do it right. Then I will say what I need to say. But later never came. Work was always there. Busy seasons never really ended. One year became the next, and before long 10 years had passed. And by then the kids had their own lives. The wife had stopped waiting. The friends had moved on. It just happened. No big moment, no argument, just silence, growing. Those words I heard in the back of my cab, all those years, they all came from the same place. I should have done it sooner. I should have said it when I had the chance. I should have been there when it still mattered. I used to feel sorry for those people when I heard them talk like that. I used to wonder how someone could let so much time go by without seeing what was happening. But I was doing the exact same thing every time I went home. That thought stayed with me for a long time. In 42 years behind the wheel, I heard thousands of people talk about their lives. Not one of them ever said they wished they had made more money. Not one of them ever said they wished they had spent more time at the office, or gotten a bigger house, or worked harder. I never heard a single person say that, not once in 42 years. It was always people, the people they were never really there for, the words they had kept saving for a better moment that never arrived, the person who was right there every day, who they had somehow never really seen. That was always what it came back to. You can have everything you worked for. You can have the car and the house and the career and the respect. But if you come home and the kitchen is dark and there is nobody there, none of it means very much. I know that now. I learned it the night of her funeral, sitting alone in that dark kitchen. People think they have time. I thought I had time. but time moves faster than you expect, and some of the things you keep putting off do not wait around forever. My wife waited for me every night for 40 years, and then she was gone. The person next to you right now is everything. That is the only thing 42 years behind the wheel ever really taught me. If there is someone in your life you have been meaning to call them today. Not this weekend, not when things settle down. Today. You do not need a reason. You do not need the perfect words. You can just say you were thinking of them. That is enough. That one phone call might mean more to them than you realize. If there is something you have been meaning to say it today. Thank you. I'm sorry. I never could have done this without you. Do not wait for the right moment. The right moment is right now, while the person is still here to hear it. I am 79 years old. I did not say what I needed to say to my wife, and that is something I will carry for the rest of my life. I do not want that for you. Later comes faster than you think, and some laters never come at all. Make the call today.